There was a woman I cared for once. Her name was Margaret. Late 80s, liver cancer. The kind that moves slow at first, like it wants to give you time to settle your affairs, then turns cruel without warning. By the time I met her, that quiet cruelty had already taken hold. She was thin, barely eating. Her skin yellowed a bit more each day, but her eyes, still so clear. She had the kind of gaze that made you stop mid-task, like she was watching something just beyond your shoulder. Margaret was quiet most days, polite, gentle, thanked us every time we adjusted her pillows or touched her hand to take a pulse. She spoke softly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping child in the next room. But as her time drew close, she started saying one thing over and over again. He promised to come get me at midnight. At first, I didn't think much of it. People near the end, they see things, memories, people from the past, sometimes just dreams they've wrapped around themselves for comfort. The brain has a way of blending worlds when the body is tired. But Margaret was different. She wasn't confused. Her mind was clear as glass, even when her body began to fail her. He promised, she'd whisper, eyes fixed on the small wall clock above her bed. He said midnight, not a minute before. She never said who he was. I asked, gently, once or twice. She smiled, but didn't answer. Not in a cryptic way, more like she was holding a shared secret, and speaking it out loud might break it. There was reverence in the way she said it, like a child trusting that the person they love most in the world will show up when they say they will. Her daughter visited during the days, mostly in silence. I remember the daughter telling me once, as she sat on the edge of the bed smoothing Margaret's blanket, that her father had passed decades ago. Car accident. Quick. No warning. Margaret had never remarried, never even dated, as far as the daughter knew. She just said one man was enough, her daughter told me, shaking her head with a half smile. She never talked about him much, but she kept everything. The letters, the photos, his cufflinks. The days wore on. Margaret's breath grew slower, her grip weaker. We were sure she would pass one evening around 10. Her breathing had shifted, that deep, raspy pattern we listen for. The final stage. Her daughter held her hand, and I stayed by the door. We watched, waited, but Margaret hung on. Her eyes opened once, looked at the clock. It was only 11:02. She closed them again and didn't speak. Minutes ticked by, and then it was midnight. The second hand landed right on the 12. Margaret opened her eyes, not wide, not dramatically, just a simple, calm opening, as if she'd heard her name spoken softly from across the room. She looked toward the corner, just past the foot of her bed, and the smallest smile lifted on her face, and then she exhaled. That was it. No trembling, no theatrics, just stillness. Her chest didn't rise again. We waited, we always do, just to be sure. A minute, two. Her daughter leaned over and kissed her forehead. I checked her pulse. Nothing. I've seen a lot of people go. Some slip away like it's the most natural thing in the world. Others fight for every last breath. But Margaret, she waited. She waited for midnight like it was a doorway, and when it came, she walked through. I stayed a while after we cleaned her room. There was a photo on her nightstand, black and white, edges worn. A man in uniform, handsome, smiling like he knew he'd just made her laugh. The kind of picture you fold and unfold 100 times until the creases wear through. I couldn't help but wonder how long she'd been holding on to that promise. Years, maybe. Decades. Through all the quiet nights and birthdays and anniversaries alone. But he kept it. Whoever he was, wherever he had gone, when the clock struck 12, he came. She knew he would. And that was enough. Hello, friends. Thank you for watching. A special shout out to our subscribers. You keep these eerie stories alive. But here's the thing, only 30% of viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy our content, hitting subscribe helps us more than you know. It takes a second, but makes a huge difference. While you're at it, like and share to keep the chills coming. Thanks again. You made this possible. See you in the next one, if you dare. It happened enough times that we started mentioning it to each other, cautiously, always with a little laugh at the end, like we were trying to keep it from sounding too real. The tug. Just a light pull at the hem of a shirt, the edge of a scrub top, sometimes even a sleeve. Like when a child needs you and doesn't want to speak up, so they reach out instead. A small, polite insistence. It never happened in the patient rooms, always in the hallways. The supply closet near the old nurses' station, the quiet corners where no one's supposed to be. I felt it first during a night shift. It was one of those long, hushed hours between 2 and 4 a.m. when everything in hospice slows down. The building hums low, patients are still, and you're left alone with your thoughts and the sound of the wall clock ticking louder than it should. I was restocking linens, turned around to grab a fresh gown from the shelf, and I felt it. A clear, deliberate tug at the back of my top. Not enough to startle, just enough to feel. I turned. No one. The hallway behind me was empty. Lights dimmed, no aides nearby, no reason for a breeze, just that quiet, patient silence. I stood there a moment longer, listening. Nothing. Eventually, I let it go. Told myself it was my shirt catching on something, even though I knew it hadn't. I didn't mention it until a week later, when an aide came in late from her rounds, pale and blinking too fast. She said, "You ever feel something grab your scrub top from behind, like a little kid?" And she laughed, that same uneasy laugh I'd used. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just me. It became a sort of shared confession among the night staff. Always the same. A soft tug. Sometimes twice, like a gentle tap. You'd turn, expecting someone small to be there, maybe a confused patient or one of the aides playing around. But there was never anyone. No fear, no malice. Just a quiet reaching out. One of our longer-tenured nurses, Janine, said it first. "It feels like a child." The others nodded almost too quickly. Like we'd all been thinking it but didn't want to say it out loud. The building had been a pediatric hospital once, decades ago, before the wings were repurposed into hospice care. We didn't talk about that history much, but it lingered. Old blueprints still labeled a few storage rooms with faded words like playroom and family quiet space. There were stories, of course. Staff who swore they'd heard soft giggles in empty rooms or found toys in places no toys had been left. But those were easy to write off. The tug wasn't. It kept happening. Months apart, sometimes weeks. Always to people who'd been working there a while. Always when we were alone. One night I was sitting near the far end of the wing, just finishing up my charting when I felt it again. A tug on my left sleeve. Stronger than before. I turned quickly, heart quickening just a little. Empty hallway. But this time I didn't move. I just sat still, let the silence settle back over the moment, and I said very softly, "I see you." I don't know why I said it. It just came out. There was no reply, no sound, just the warm hush of the overnight hours, but something in the air eased, like tension exhaling. I think about that a lot, the way something invisible, something quiet and persistent, reached for us like it needed to be known. Not feared, not driven out, just noticed. In hospice, we talk about presence, the presence of pain, of peace, of people preparing to go. But sometimes I think there's another kind of presence, the ones that never quite left. Not out of fear, not out of unrest, just a reluctance to be forgotten. Maybe it was a child, maybe more than one. Maybe the place still holds on to their small, unfinished stories, the ones that never got the chance to end properly. And maybe sometimes they reach out to us in the only way they can. Not with words, just a tug. Just enough to say, "I'm still here." There was a long corridor in one of the older wings of the hospice, smooth linoleum floor, dim lights that hummed when the building settled for the night. That hallway had seen more goodbyes than most churches. If you walked it late enough, you'd swear the walls had learned how to hold their breath. Room 209 sat at the end of that hallway. That's where Mr. Leland was. Thomas Leland. He'd been with us about 4 weeks. Mid-70s, end-stage pulmonary fibrosis. The kind of illness that slowly robs you of air, breath by breath, inch by inch, until your whole world is reduced to waiting between gasps. He used to joke that his lungs were like 2 tired accordions, wheeze in, wheeze out. Despite the illness, he had this quiet steadiness about him. A former teacher, math of all things. Liked to talk about numbers, about the way they could be constant even when everything else was falling apart. 2 and 2 is always 4, he'd say, even when your whole damn life adds up to something you didn't plan. He had a way of making people laugh at the hard parts. That's a gift, really. He came to rely on the wheelchair in his last weeks. Not that he ever liked it. He was stubborn about trying to walk on his own, even when his legs trembled under him. But eventually, he gave in. Let us help. Let the chair carry some of the weight his body couldn't anymore. The day he passed was quiet. Too quiet, even for hospice. He'd been unconscious most of the day, breathing shallow but steady. His niece had sat with him all afternoon, reading out loud from one of his old math journals. The kind of stuff I'd never understand, but he'd once loved. Around 7 p.m., she kissed his forehead, told him it was okay to go, and stepped out for a coffee. Said she'd be right back. I was just finishing a check-in with another patient when I heard the sound. Wheels, rolling, smooth, deliberate. Now, wheelchairs aren't supposed to move on their own. These aren't the cheap folding kind. They're heavy, solid frames. You need hands or a push or gravity. But this one was moving. Steady pace, right down the hallway, no rush, no wobble, like someone was guiding it. I came around the corner, and there it was. Empty. Rolling slowly toward room 209. No one was nearby, no open doors, no draft, nothing that made sense. It rolled all the way to his room and stopped, not at an angle, not veering off. It stopped dead center at his doorway like it had known exactly where to go. The wheels gave one small creak, then silence. I looked in on Mr. Leland. He was gone, still, eyes closed, mouth relaxed. You could tell he'd left gently, no strain, no last-minute fight. Just gone. Like someone had come for him while I'd been watching that chair. I checked his vitals, called it, notified the niece. She cried, of course, but she also smiled in that way people do when they know someone's finally at peace. I didn't say anything about the wheelchair right away. It didn't seem like the right moment. But after the body was taken and the room cleaned, I went back out into the hallway. The chair was still there, just sitting outside the door like it was waiting to be put away. I wheeled it back to storage myself, rolled smooth the whole way, no resistance, no drag. I placed it where we always do, lined up with the others. The next morning, one of the aides asked me if I'd left it out the night before. Said she found it exactly where I'd left it, blocking the doorway. She hadn't moved it, neither had anyone else. And look, I don't pretend to understand it. There are 1,000 ways you could explain it if you needed to. Maybe someone nudged it without knowing. Maybe the floor was tilted just so. Maybe the building sighed and gravity did the rest. But the truth is, that chair hadn't moved all day. Not once. It was parked where we always park it, until it wasn't, until it was at his door. And maybe that's just what it was, an empty chair rolling down a hallway. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something else. Maybe it was him, leaving the way he came, steady, unhurried, still holding on to the wheels that helped him move when the world had gotten too heavy. Maybe it was the last thing he touched before he let go. It was just a room, at least by the way it was built. 4 walls, a window overlooking a side lot, standard hospital bed, side table with a flickering fluorescent lamp that maintenance swore was fine. It looked like every other room on the floor, but it wasn't. And those of us who worked there long enough knew it. We didn't talk about it much, not out loud. There are things in this line of work you learn to acknowledge with quiet glances or long pauses in conversation. But if you were around long enough, you'd notice the pattern. Patients didn't stay in 313. They tried. We tried. But they never lasted more than a day or two. And not because their condition changed, not because of medical reasons we could chart and explain. They just asked to leave, quickly. Some outright refused to stay the moment they were wheeled in. Others tried to tough it out, but you'd see it in their faces by sundown, this tension around the eyes, like they were holding their breath for hours on end. One man, James H., he lasted a night and a half. That was longer than most. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, mid-60s. Tough guy on the outside. He told me he'd worked the docks for 30 years, wasn't scared of pain, wasn't scared of dying. But he was scared of that room. He didn't say it outright at first, just asked if he could be moved. Said the air felt thick. Not hot, not stuffy, thick, like walking into a room filled with invisible wool. I've never forgotten that word. He said it felt like he was being watched, even when the door was closed and the blinds were drawn. That night, I checked on him around 2 a.m. He was wide awake, not restless, alert, like he was expecting something. He asked if I saw it. When I asked what, he didn't answer right away, just pointed to the corner by the built-in wardrobe. "It's there," he whispered. "Hasn't moved." I looked. Nothing. He wouldn't close his eyes again after that. Just lay there, breathing shallow and fast, eyes fixed on the corner. We moved him the next morning. He didn't want to talk about it, just thanked us and asked if the new room had a window. He passed quietly 4 days later in room 310. Peaceful, restful, the way we hope for all our patients. But 313 stayed empty for a week after that. No one wanted to assign it. It wasn't policy, but the night nurses, myself included, found reasons to place new admissions elsewhere. A busted thermostat, a need for deep cleaning, any excuse to leave it be. Eventually, someone else from admin insisted we fill it, said we were short beds. We moved in a young woman, late 40s, breast cancer spread to her spine. Her name was Clara. Bright smile, a journal she kept tucked under her pillow, pages filled with little sketches of flowers, corners softened from her fingers. She lasted 12 hours. I remember going in to check her IV. Her face was pale, but not from pain. Dread. Real dread. She wouldn't even look toward the wardrobe. "I think someone else is already here," she whispered. When I asked her what she meant, she shook her head so slowly, like she was afraid to draw attention. I don't want to stay here." "Please." We moved her before sunset. She was better in the next room, not medically, but emotionally. Her breathing slowed, her coloring returned. She even laughed the next day when I brought her a warm blanket, said it smelled like cinnamon toast, which it didn't, but I didn't correct her. After that, we stopped assigning room 313. Not officially. It still sat on the chart as available, clean, ready for use. But everyone, doctors, nurses, even the cleaning crew, knew to leave it off the list. Eventually, they turned it into storage, not because it was full of ghosts or strange sounds or cold spots. Not because of lights flickering or doors slamming or anything you could prove with a camera, but because too many people, sick people, dying people, people with nothing left to fear, all said the same things. The air, the feeling, the corner. And look, maybe it's just the shape of the room. Maybe the way the sunlight hits the floor at noon throws a strange shadow, or the old wiring gives off a hum that only some people can hear. I don't know. But I've held hands through hundreds of goodbyes. I've watched brave people face their end with grace and clarity. And I believe that when the veil gets thin, they can sense things we can't. Not superstition, just awareness. A knowing that can't be explained with monitors or vitals. Room 313 didn't want anyone. Or maybe, just maybe, whatever was still in there hadn't figured out how to let go. We never had a cat in the building. Not officially, not even unofficially, the way some long-term facilities adopt a stray and pretend it's coincidence when it keeps showing up at the back door. This was hospice, after all. Clean, quiet, no fur, no dander, no unexpected paw prints, just the slow rhythm of oxygen machines and the hush of soft-soled shoes on polished floors. But the patients told us about it. Not all of them, just some, and only near the end. They'd say the same thing, nearly word for word, even though none of them ever met each other. "A cat jumped up on my bed last night," sometimes said with a chuckle, sometimes with a slight tremble. They'd describe the feeling so clearly, warm, heavy, settling into the crook of their legs like it belonged there. You could see it in their eyes, not confusion, not hallucination, recognition. One woman, Evelyn, I remember well, mid-70s, colon cancer, fiercely independent, didn't want help bathing, didn't like her pain meds too strong. She was the kind who asked about your day even while hers was quietly ending. She told me one morning, casual as anything, "There was a cat in my room last night." I smiled and said I doubted it. She smiled back and said, "No, really. Orange tabby, I think. Kind of heavy. Climbed up right on my legs and purred for a while. I didn't mind. I liked it, actually. Reminded me of my childhood." She passed in her sleep the next evening. Peaceful. Pillow slightly damp from where her hand had rested against her cheek. No struggle. No pain. A few weeks later, it was a man named George, emphysema, ex-smoker, sharp sense of humor, used to joke that we should serve whiskey with the morphine. He called me over one night and said, "Do you guys keep animals here? I swear I felt a cat on the bed last night." He pointed right to the same place, at his feet. "Real warm," he said. "Could have sworn I heard it breathing." George died the next morning before breakfast trays went out. I remember opening the window a few inches after we pronounced him, like we always do. More tradition than protocol, but it feels right. Some people say it helps the soul leave gently. After the fourth or fifth time, we started to take quiet notice. The aides talked about it first. They always know before we do. They're the ones in and out of rooms at all hours, fluffing pillows, holding hands, sitting with people when the rest of the world has gone to sleep. It happened again, one would say in the break room. Miss P said she felt a cat at her feet last night. And sure enough, we'd lose her within the day. Always the same story, a weight, warmth, sometimes a quiet purring like someone humming from another room, but never seen, only felt. We looked, of course. Maintenance checked for open vents, stray animals, loose insulation, nothing. We even joked about buying a thermal camera, but deep down, no one really wanted to catch it. It felt sacred somehow, not frightening, just present, like something was doing the rounds before we could. One night I stayed late, one of those shifts where the building feels half asleep and time slows to a hum. I was checking vitals in a room when I felt it too, for the first and only time. Not on me, but on the bed beside a patient who hadn't spoken in 2 days. She was sleeping, eyes sunken, lips parted, hands curled like dry leaves. And there it was, a slight shift in the blanket near her legs, a soft dip like someone settling in. I didn't move, I didn't speak, I just stood there, heart calm, breath steady. Somehow I knew this wasn't mine to interrupt. She passed before dawn, quietly. I think the cat was there to let her know it was okay. Some nurses think it's just a story we pass around to make sense of things we can't fix, a myth for tired hearts. Maybe they're right. But I think sometimes the world sends small things to help carry big things. Maybe this isn't a ghost story at all. Maybe it's a kindness sent in the shape of comfort. In this line of work, we don't get many answers, but I know what I've seen, or more accurately, what I've felt. And I believe, somewhere between one breath and the next, a little weight settles down at the foot of the bed, just long enough to say, "You're not alone." Thank you all for joining me on these journeys. Your support means everything, and I love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat or gave you chills, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting stories. Have you ever experienced something similar? Or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts. And if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories, and remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare.